That engine is going to tear itself apart before sunrise. Naomi Carter's voice was barely above a whisper, but the moment the words left her mouth, the silver tray slipped from her hands and shattered across the marble floor of the Whitmore Grand Hotel ballroom. Crystal glasses exploded into tiny glittering pieces beneath the chandeliers, and nearly 200 guests turned at once. The orchestra stumbled to silence. A woman in diamonds gasped softly. Somewhere near the stage, someone muttered about incompetent staff. But Naomi wasn't looking at the broken glasses. Her eyes were locked on the enormous glass wall overlooking the testing hangar across the courtyard, where the prototype turbine engine sat beneath cold white floodlights like a sleeping beast. Even from inside the ballroom, over the clinking forks and polite laughter of billionaires, she had heard it. That sound. A faint metallic shudder buried beneath the smooth rotation. Wrong. Dangerous. Familiar. Ethan Whitmore noticed her immediately. At 48, the billionaire founder of Whitmore Dynamics carried the kind of presence that silenced rooms without effort. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a midnight black tuxedo worth more than most people's monthly rent, he stepped away from a cluster of investors and stared directly at Naomi. His expression hardened as he glanced down at the broken tray. "What exactly is going on here?" he asked. The ballroom held its breath. Naomi swallowed hard. She could feel every eye pressing against her skin, but the sound from the engine still echoed in her chest louder than the humiliation crawling up her throat. "Sir," she said carefully, "that compressor doesn't sound stable." A few nearby executives exchanged amused looks. One man laughed into his whiskey glass. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. "Excuse me." Naomi pointed weakly toward the hangar. "There's a vibration in the secondary turbine. If it keeps running like that, the pressure could crack the housing." Silence. Then came the laughter. Not loud at first. Just scattered chuckles rolling across the room like distant thunder. Someone near the bar whispered, "The waitress thinks she's an engineer." Another voice followed. "Maybe she watched a YouTube video." Naomi felt heat rush into her cheeks, but she didn't lower her eyes. She knew that sound because her father had taught her to hear machines the way musicians hear notes. Growing up in a tiny garage outside Dayton, Ohio, she had spent nights falling asleep beside half-disassembled engines, while her father explained that every machine told the truth if you listened closely enough. Ethan took a slow step toward her. "Miss Naomi," she answered quietly. "Naomi Carter." "Naomi," he repeated, calm but cold. "You're here to serve drinks, not diagnose a $5 million turbine." A few guests nodded approvingly. Naomi gripped the edge of the empty tray stand to steady herself. Through the towering windows, lightning flickered somewhere beyond the city skyline, briefly illuminating the massive engine across the courtyard. She could almost feel the vibration through the floor. "Wrong. Wrong. Wrong." Ethan adjusted his cufflinks and turned slightly back toward his investors. "Clean this up," he said dismissively, "and someone escort her back to the kitchen." Naomi looked once more toward the hangar. The engine lights pulsed softly against the storm-dark sky. Then she heard it again. A tiny metallic tremor hidden beneath the roar. Her stomach tightened, because this time she wasn't just afraid the machine would fail. She was certain it was already dying. Naomi knelt carefully beside the shattered crystal, while the ballroom slowly returned to life around her. Conversations restarted in low, uncomfortable murmurs, silverware clinked against expensive china, and the orchestra resumed its soft jazz melody as if nothing had happened at all. But the humiliation still burned hot beneath her skin. She could feel it in the tightness of her chest, and the trembling in her fingers as she gathered the broken glass into a small black tray. Above her, the chandeliers reflected thousands of fractured lights across the marble floor like frozen stars. "You should probably stop talking before you get yourself fired." The voice came quietly from beside her. Naomi looked up. A young bartender named Luis stood near the service station, polishing glasses with nervous hands. His expression carried sympathy, but also warning. Naomi exhaled slowly. "I know what I heard." Luis lowered his voice further. "That man owns half the energy market in this country. People do not correct Ethan Whitmore in front of investors." Naomi glanced through the towering windows again. Across the courtyard, the testing hangar glowed beneath harsh industrial floodlights. Rain had started falling now, streaking against the glass in silver lines. Even from here, she could still hear the faint uneven rhythm beneath the turbine rotation. A tiny metallic pulse. Like a skipped heartbeat. Wrong. Her father used to say machines begged for help long before they failed. Most people just never listen long enough to hear it. Naomi. She turned sharply as the floor manager approached. Denise Harper wore a perfectly pressed black suit and the exhausted expression of someone already having a terrible night. Kitchen. Now. Naomi rose immediately, clutching the tray against her chest. Several guests watched her walk away. Some with amusement, others with pity. Ethan Whitmore did not look at her again. He stood near the center of the ballroom speaking calmly with a group of government investors while lightning flashed faintly behind the glass walls. Naomi disappeared through the service doors into the heat and noise of the kitchen. Steam curled through the air. Cooks shouted orders across stainless steel counters. Plates rattled. Fryers hissed. But even here, buried beneath the chaos, she still heard it. That vibration. Denise crossed her arms tightly. What were you thinking out there? Naomi hesitated. The engine is unstable. Denise closed her eyes briefly like someone praying for patience. No. What is unstable is your employment status if you keep embarrassing this hotel in front of Whitmore Dynamics. Naomi swallowed hard. I was trying to help. By pretending to be an engineer? Denise snapped. Naomi stiffened. I never pretended. Denise studied her for a moment, then lowered her voice. Listen to me carefully. Men like Ethan Whitmore do not believe people like us belong anywhere near rooms like that unless we are carrying trays. The words landed heavier than Naomi expected. Not because they were cruel, because they were familiar. Naomi looked down at the faint oil stain still darkening the red cloth tied around her wrist beneath the sleeve of her uniform. Her father's old shop rag. The only thing she still carried from the garage after he passed away 3 winters earlier. Before Denise could speak again, the kitchen lights flickered once. Then twice. Several cooks looked up nervously. Somewhere beyond the walls of the hotel came a low mechanical groan powerful enough to vibrate the silver racks beside the prep stations. Naomi froze instantly. Her eyes widened. No, she whispered. The entire building suddenly dimmed for half a second as another deep metallic tremor rolled through the floor beneath their feet. In the distance, across the rain-soaked courtyard, a warning alarm began echoing through the testing hangar. The warning alarm echoed louder through the hotel corridors as kitchen staff froze in confusion around the stainless steel prep tables. Red emergency lights flickered briefly across the ceiling before fading back to white. Someone near the ovens cursed under his breath. Another employee pulled out a phone, already whispering about the investors upstairs. But Naomi was no longer listening. The vibration beneath the floor had changed. It was deeper now. Unstable. She knew that sound the same way sailors knew storms before clouds appeared. Denise grabbed Naomi's arm lightly before she could move. Do not even think about going over there. Naomi looked toward the service exit leading outside into the rain. That engine is overheating. And that is not your problem, Denise snapped. Security already locked down the hangar. Another metallic groan rolled through the building. Glassware rattled against shelves. Somewhere in the ballroom above them, startled voices rose into nervous murmurs. Naomi pulled gently free from Denise's grip. If the compressor seals fail, the entire system will shut itself down. Denise stared at her in disbelief. How do you even know these words? Naomi hesitated only a second. Because my father built turbine engines for 20 years. Then she was already moving. She pushed through the back hallway doors and sprinted toward the courtyard entrance as cold rain hammered against the pavement outside. Wind whipped through the narrow alley between the hotel and the massive testing facility. Her black waitress shoes splashed through puddles while lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the enormous Whitmore Dynamics logo glowing blue against the hangar wall. Ahead of her, engineers and security guards rushed frantically through the open bay doors. Naomi could already smell it before she stepped inside. Burned coolant. Hot metal. Panic. The testing hangar looked nothing like the polished ballroom across the courtyard. It was loud and industrial, filled with steel walkways, hanging cables, blinking monitors, and the sharp scent of machinery pushed beyond its limits. In the center of the massive room stood the turbine engine itself, nearly 20 feet long beneath harsh white floodlights. Steam hissed from one side of the housing, while warning messages flashed red across surrounding computer screens. Pressure spike in chamber 2, someone shouted. Cooling system is not responding. Engineers moved frantically around the platform while Ethan Whitmore stood near the central control station, his expression colder now than Naomi had ever seen it. Gone was the polished billionaire smiling for investors. This man looked exhausted, furious, and dangerously close to losing control. One of the senior engineers slammed his headset onto a console. The stabilization software is rejecting manual override. Another voice answered immediately. Then reboot the sequence. We already tried. Ethan turned sharply. You told me this system was ready for tomorrow morning. Nobody answered him. The silence said enough. Naomi stepped closer through the chaos, unnoticed at first. Her eyes locked on the turbine blades spinning unevenly inside the partial glass housing. There it was again. That faint stuttering vibration beneath the main rotation. Not mechanical damage. Timing imbalance. Her father's voice echoed clearly in her memory. If the rhythm is wrong, the machine is fighting itself. A loud warning tone suddenly pierced the hangar. Several monitors flashed crimson at once. Automatic shutdown failure. The room erupted into overlapping voices. Why is it not shutting down? Pressure is still climbing. We are losing synchronization. Ethan slammed one hand against the control desk hard enough to silence everyone instantly. Rainwater dripped from Naomi's hair onto her shoulders as she stared at the screen data from across the room. Then she saw it. One tiny sequence buried inside the stabilization cycle. Wrong. Deliberately wrong. Naomi's eyes widened slowly. Oh no, she whispered. Somebody changed the algorithm. The words left Naomi's mouth before she could stop them. Somebody changed the algorithm. The sentence cut through the noise of the hangar sharper than the warning alarms overhead. Several engineers turned immediately. One of them actually laughed in disbelief. Ethan Whitmore looked up from the flashing control monitors, irritation already burning across his face before he even recognized her. Rainwater still dripped from Naomi's dark curls onto the concrete floor as she stood near the edge of the platform in her black waitress uniform, completely out of place among the steel machinery and glowing data screens. Ethan stared at her for one long second. How did you even get in here? Naomi ignored the question. Her eyes remained fixed on the scrolling stabilization code, racing across the monitor. The synchronization timing is wrong, she said quickly. The pressure compensation loop was altered. A senior engineer named Victor Hale stepped forward with a sharp scoff. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a white lab coat with the Whitmore Dynamics logo stitched over the chest, he looked at Naomi like she had wandered into the wrong universe. This is not a diner counter, sweetheart. Naomi did not flinch. The compressor is fighting itself because the feedback cycle is delayed by almost half a second. Victor laughed again, louder this time. You memorized some technical words online and suddenly you are an engineer? A few nervous chuckles followed from nearby technicians. But Naomi was no longer listening to them. Her focus stayed locked on the turbine. The sound had changed again. Faster now. More desperate. Ethan crossed his arms tightly. You have 30 seconds to explain why you are interrupting my team during a system's failure. Naomi stepped closer to the monitor despite the disapproving stares surrounding her. Because your team keeps looking for mechanical damage when the real problem is in the software timing. Victor shook his head immediately. Impossible. We ran diagnostics all afternoon. Naomi pointed toward the screen. Then why is the secondary pressure loop receiving duplicate compensation commands every fourth rotation? Victor opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. His eyes flickered briefly toward the data stream, just enough for Naomi to notice. Ethan noticed it too. The billionaire slowly turned toward Victor. Is she wrong? Victor straightened instantly. Of course she is. But the confidence in his voice cracked slightly around the edges. Naomi stepped closer to the monitor again. The engine is trying to correct pressure fluctuations that do not exist anymore. It is overcompensating itself into instability. Another loud warning tone echoed across the hangar. Steam burst sharply from one side of the turbine housing as technicians scrambled backward. One monitor suddenly flashed critical load variance detected in bright red letters. Ethan's jaw tightened. Can you stabilize it? Victor hesitated. Just for a second. But in a room full of frightened engineers and nervous investors watching through the glass observation deck above, 1 second felt enormous. We are working on it, Victor answered carefully. Naomi stared at the turbine blades spinning unevenly behind the protective casing. No, she whispered softly. You are running out of time. Ethan looked at her again. Really looked this time. Not as a waitress carrying broken glasses. Not as an interruption. But as someone strangely calm while every expert in the room seemed terrified. How do you know all this? He asked quietly. Naomi's fingers tightened around the faded red cloth tied around her wrist. Because my father taught me how to hear when engines are lying. Victor rolled his eyes impatiently. This is ridiculous. We are trusting a waitress because she grew up near a garage. Naomi turned toward him fully now. Her voice steady despite the humiliation pressing against her chest. No. You should trust me because your engine is 6 minutes away from complete shutdown. Silence slammed across the room. Then another violent warning alarm exploded overhead. The alarm lights painted the hangar in flashing waves of red and white as technicians rushed between consoles with rising panic in their voices. Rain hammered against the massive steel roof overhead, while the turbine engine groaned louder beneath its own unstable rotation. Naomi could feel the vibration through the soles of her shoes now. It was no longer hidden. The machine sounded exhausted. Ethan Whitmore stared at the warning screens, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his face twitched. Above them, behind the observation glass, nervous investors and military representatives watched the chaos unfold in silence. Millions of dollars hung in the air alongside the smell of overheated steel. Victor Hale turned sharply toward the nearest technician. Reduce rotational load immediately. It is not responding, the technician answered. The override command keeps looping. Naomi stepped toward the main console before she could second-guess herself. Because the corrupted timing cycle keeps rewriting the correction commands. Victor spun toward her instantly. Enough. His voice cracked across the hangar louder than the alarms. You are a waitress. Stop pretending you belong in this room. Naomi froze for only half a second. Then she looked directly at Ethan instead. If you keep forcing manual overrides, the stabilization sequence will collapse completely. Another deep shudder rolled through the turbine housing. Sparks flashed briefly near the rear exhaust vents before disappearing again. Several engineers instinctively backed away. Ethan's eyes narrowed toward Naomi. And what exactly are you suggesting? Naomi swallowed carefully. Every eye in the room pressed against her at once. Men with engineering degrees, senior designers, executives, security guards, all staring at the black waitress standing beside a $5 million machine like she had lost her mind. But beneath the fear climbing into her throat, another feeling rose stronger. Certainty. Shut it down manually, she said quietly. Victor scoffed immediately. That could destroy 6 months of calibration data. Naomi shook her head. If you do not shut it down now, there will not be any data left to save. Ethan looked toward the turbine again. The massive blades behind the reinforced casing now spun with a faint uneven wobble visible even from across the platform. One investor behind the observation glass lifted a phone nervously to his ear. Somewhere nearby, a monitor emitted a sharp warning chirp before going black completely. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. Can you fix it? The question stunned the room into silence. Naomi blinked once. Victor looked horrified. Ethan, this is absurd. But Ethan did not look at Victor. His eyes remained fixed on Naomi. Can you? Naomi turned toward the engine again. Her father's voice echoed softly in her memory. Machines do not care where you came from. They only care whether you understand them. She stepped closer to the monitor, scanning the corrupted synchronization data streaming across the screen. Yes, she whispered. But not tonight. Victor laughed sharply. Wonderful. Our last hope needs more time. Naomi ignored him. The system needs a full reset, and the damaged timing architecture has to be rebuilt manually. Ethan's expression darkened further. Tomorrow morning at 8, those investors expect a live demonstration. Naomi finally looked him directly in the eye. Then you should cancel it. The sentence landed like ice water across the room. Ethan's face hardened instantly. That demonstration decides whether this company secures a federal contract worth $2.4 billion. Naomi's voice stayed calm despite the tension squeezing her chest. And if that engine fails in front of them, your company loses more than money. Silence. Rain thundered overhead. The turbine emitted another strained metallic cry that echoed through the hangar like an animal fighting to breathe. Ethan looked slowly around the room at his terrified engineers, the flashing warnings, the collapsing data feeds. Then back at Naomi. How long would you need? Naomi stared at the engine for one long moment. Until sunrise. For a moment, nobody in the hangar moved. The alarms continued pulsing overhead while rain battered the steel walls outside. But inside the room, silence spread slowly through the engineers like shock freezing across glass. Ethan Whitmore stood motionless beside the control console, staring at Naomi Carter as though he still could not decide whether she was brilliant or completely insane. Victor Hale recovered first. You cannot seriously be considering this. His voice carried sharp disbelief now mixed with something darker. Fear. We are talking about one of the most advanced turbine systems ever built. Naomi looked directly at him. Then stop treating it like a presentation piece and start treating it like a machine. A few technicians exchanged nervous glances. Ethan finally spoke without taking his eyes off Naomi. What do you need? The question hit the room harder than the alarms. Victor stepped forward immediately. Ethan, if this goes wrong. It is already going wrong, Ethan interrupted coldly. The billionaire turned toward the nearest operations manager. Clear the hangar except for essential personnel. Victor stared at him. You are trusting her over your own engineering division? Ethan's expression darkened. At the moment, she is the only person in this building who saw the failure before it happened. No one answered after that. One by one, nervous staff members began stepping back from the platform. Investors disappeared from the observation deck above. Security guards moved toward the exits. The massive hangar slowly emptied until only a skeleton crew remained beneath the cold industrial lights. Naomi stepped closer to the turbine platform, her breathing slowing for the first time all night. Close, the engine looked even larger than before. Steel pipes twisted around the housing like giant silver veins. Heat shimmered faintly above the surface panels. Warning lights blinked crimson across the damaged synchronization system. She gently touched one side of the casing with her fingertips. Even through the metal, she could feel the uneven rhythm inside, like a heartbeat stumbling out of time. Ethan watched her carefully from several feet away. How did a waitress learn to rebuild engines? Naomi kept her eyes on the turbine. My father owned a repair garage outside Dayton. Her voice softened slightly beneath the hum of machinery. We fix farm equipment, diesel trucks, old turbines. Whatever people could not afford to replace. Ethan folded his arms quietly. And now? Naomi hesitated. Now the garage is gone. For the first time all evening, Ethan noticed the red cloth wrapped around her wrist more carefully. Oil stains darkened the faded fabric despite years of washing. That belonged to him? Naomi nodded once. He used to tie it around his hand whenever he worked. Ethan looked away briefly toward the dark rain streaking down the hangar windows. What happened to him? Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around a wrench lying nearby. Cancer. The word fell softly into the steel silence around them. After the hospital bills, we lost the garage 6 months later. Ethan said nothing after that. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city skyline. Naomi climbed onto the service platform beside the engine and opened the first maintenance panel. Warm air rushed outward carrying the scent of coolant and overheated metal. Inside, rows of precision components glowed beneath diagnostic lights. Naomi closed her eyes briefly and listened. Not to the alarms. Not to the people. To the machine itself. Her father's voice returned again from years ago beneath the buzzing garage lights of her childhood. Do not just look at engines, Naomi. Listen to them. Machines tell the truth faster than people do. She opened her eyes slowly. Then she saw it. A tiny sequence buried deep inside the timing architecture. One altered line hidden beneath thousands of commands. Deliberate. Naomi's expression changed instantly. Ethan noticed it immediately. What is it? Naomi stared at the screen without blinking. This was not an accident. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the storm outside. This was not an accident. Ethan Whitmore slowly stepped closer to the service platform while Naomi continued staring at the corrupted timing sequence glowing across the monitor. The massive turbine behind her emitted another strained metallic hum that vibrated through the steel flooring beneath their feet. "Explain," Ethan said quietly. Naomi zoomed deeper into the stabilization architecture, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard now with a confidence that no longer resembled a frightened waitress trying to survive embarrassment. "The engine did not fail on its own," she said. "Somebody inserted a recursive delay command inside the pressure compensation loop." Ethan's expression hardened. "In English." Naomi pointed toward the screen. "The system keeps receiving instructions to correct pressure spikes that already passed 0.4 of a second earlier. It is basically chasing problems that no longer exist." Ethan stared at the monitor in silence. Even without fully understanding the code, he could see the endless repeating commands flooding the synchronization system like poison moving through veins. Naomi swallowed carefully. That kind of modification does not happen by accident. Behind them, Victor Hale approached slowly with 2 senior engineers trailing behind him. "What is she talking about now?" Naomi did not look away from the screen. The timing architecture was altered manually. Victor's face immediately tightened. "That is impossible." Naomi finally turned toward him. "No. Impossible would be this engine reaching critical instability, by coincidence 6 hours before the biggest demonstration in company history." One of the younger engineers nearby looked visibly uneasy. Ethan noticed. "Did anyone besides your core team have access to the system?" Victor answered too quickly. "Of course not." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why was the override authorization signed under executive credentials at 11:42 tonight? Silence. Even the alarm suddenly seemed quieter. Ethan slowly looked toward Victor. "What did she just say?" Victor forced out a sharp laugh that sounded completely empty. "Probably another misunderstanding from someone reading data she does not understand." Naomi clicked. Another screen open. A digital authorization log appeared instantly beneath the synchronization architecture. There it was. Executive system override confirmed. Ethan's face darkened as he stepped closer to the monitor. "That authorization belongs to your division." Victor crossed his arms tightly. "Thousands of employees use engineering credentials. Not executive override access," Naomi answered softly. Victor looked at her with growing irritation. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" Naomi blinked in disbelief. "Enjoying what?" "Pretending to matter." The words hit the room hard. But Naomi did not shrink beneath them. Instead, she looked directly back at him, calm and steady. "I am trying to stop your engine from destroying itself." Victor opened his mouth again, but Ethan interrupted first. "Enough." The billionaire's voice carried a dangerous calm now. He turned toward the security supervisor near the far platform. "Lock all remote access to the turbine system." Victor's jaw tightened instantly. "Ethan, this is becoming irrational." "No," Ethan answered coldly. "What is irrational is watching my entire engineering division panic, while the hotel waitress remains the only person making sense." The sentence landed like a slap across the room. Naomi looked away immediately, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. But inside her chest something shifted quietly for the first time all night. Respect. Small. Fragile. But real. Ethan stepped beside her at the console and lowered his voice slightly. "Can you remove the corrupted commands?" Naomi studied the timing architecture again. "Yes." "How long?" Naomi glanced toward the giant wall clock above the hangar doors. 3:27 in the morning. Rain still hammered against the windows while thunder rolled across the sleeping city outside. She exhaled slowly. "If nobody interrupts me," she said softly, "I can bring your engine back before sunrise." By 4:15 in the morning, the hangar no longer sounded like a room full of frightened executives. Sounded like work. Real work. The screaming alarms had finally stopped. In their place came the steady rhythm of tools clicking against steel keyboards. Tapping softly, cooling fans humming beneath rows of glowing monitors, and somewhere in the distance, rain falling against the massive glass walls like static from an old radio. Naomi stood alone on the upper service platform beside the open turbine housing, Sleeves rolled to her elbows, grease darkening her fingers and the faded red cloth around her wrist. Strands of curly hair clung to her forehead from the heat pouring off the machine. Beneath the harsh industrial lights, she no longer looked like a hotel waitress. She looked like she belonged here. Ethan Whitmore watched from below in complete silence. Every few minutes, Naomi climbed down from the platform to rewrite another section of corrupted synchronization code, before climbing back up to recalibrate the pressure regulators manually. She moved with the calm precision of someone rebuilding something familiar rather than impossible. The younger technicians had stopped whispering about her hours ago. Now they simply watched. One engineer quietly handed her tools before she even asked. Another adjusted diagnostic feeds exactly the way she requested. Somewhere during the night, disbelief had turned into trust. Victor Hale hated every second of it. He stood near the far control station with crossed arms and a face pale beneath the fluorescent lighting. Every time Naomi corrected another failed sequence, the tension in his jaw tightened further. Ethan noticed. He noticed everything now. Especially the way Victor avoided looking directly at the authorization log still glowing on the side monitor. Naomi leaned over the central console again, studying the final synchronization cycle scrolling across the screen. Pressure compensation is stable, she murmured softly, initiating manual alignment. A nearby technician looked stunned. The fluctuation dropped below 2%. Another answered quietly, "That is impossible." Naomi shook her head without looking up. No. Impossible would be fixing bad engineering with good marketing. Ethan almost smiled at that. Almost. Outside, the storm had finally begun drifting east across the city skyline. Through the massive hangar windows, faint shades of deep blue slowly replaced the blackness of night. Dawn was coming. Naomi wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist before carefully typing the final command into the stabilization system. The turbine answered with a low mechanical hum that rolled gently through the hangar floor beneath them. Smooth this time. Controlled. Alive. Ethan stepped closer instinctively. What just happened? Naomi exhaled slowly for what felt like the first time in hours. The engine stopped fighting itself. Silence spread across the room again. But this silence felt different. Softer. Hopeful. Naomi reached for the startup controls mounted beside the platform railing. Her fingers paused briefly over the switch. "Once I restart the rotation cycle," she said quietly, "there is no room left for mistakes." Ethan looked up at her beneath the pale industrial lights. "Can it handle full load?" Naomi met his eyes calmly. "Yes." Victor finally snapped from across the room. "You cannot seriously trust her calculations." Naomi looked toward him. "Then why are you scared they will work?" Victor said nothing. The question lingered in the air unanswered. Ethan turned slowly toward the control team below. "Clear the platform." Engineers stepped backward immediately. Technicians moved away from the turbine housing while the massive room grew still enough for Naomi to hear her own breathing again. The first pale line of sunrise touched the edge of the city outside the glass walls. Naomi wrapped her fingers around the ignition controls. Her father's voice echoed one final time inside her memory. "Machines tell the truth faster than people do." She closed her eyes briefly. Then she pressed the switch. The turbine answered with a deep mechanical roar that rolled through the hangar like thunder beneath the earth. Every light across the control panels flashed white at once, as the massive blades inside the housing began spinning faster and faster beneath the pale glow of sunrise pouring through the glass walls. Naomi stood perfectly still beside the ignition controls, eyes locked on the pressure monitors climbing steadily upward. 10%. 20. 40. Around the room, engineers held their breath. No. Alarms sounded. No warning lights flashed. Only the smooth rising hum of the engine filled the enormous space now, clean and powerful like a jet preparing to leave the ground. Ethan Whitmore stared at the turbine in disbelief. Hours earlier the machine had been collapsing under its own corrupted commands. Now it sounded alive. Stable. Stronger than before. One technician near the back console whispered softly, "I do not believe this." Another shook his head slowly while watching the data stream scroll across the monitors. The synchronization variance is below 1%. Naomi adjusted one final calibration setting and stepped back from the controls. "Pressure stabilization complete," she said quietly. You can push full load now. Ethan looked at her. Full load. Naomi nodded once. Trust the engine. The words lingered between them. Ethan turned toward the control team. Run it. A technician swallowed hard before pressing the final sequence command. The turbine accelerated immediately, its low metallic hum deepening into a smooth controlled thunder that vibrated through the steel floor beneath everyone's feet. Heat waves shimmered above the housing while the sunrise outside painted the glass walls gold and silver. Then the final diagnostic appeared across the central monitor in bright green letters. System stable. Complete load successful. For one long second nobody moved. Then the room erupted. Engineers began cheering. Someone laughed in pure disbelief. Another technician actually wiped tears from his face while staring at the monitors. The fear that had poisoned the hangar all night vanished at once beneath relief so strong it felt almost unreal. Naomi remained silent through all of it. Exhaustion finally settled into her shoulders as she leaned lightly against the platform railing. Her hands trembled now that the adrenaline was fading. Ethan slowly climbed the metal stairs toward her while the celebration echoed below them. He stopped only a few feet away. For the first time since she met him, his expression carried no arrogance, no distance, only respect. Real respect. You saved my company tonight, he said quietly. Naomi looked down at the faded red cloth around her wrist. I just fixed the engine. Ethan shook his head slightly. No. You did something none of my people could do. Naomi smiled faintly, tired but calm. Your people stopped listening to the machine. Before Ethan could answer, security officers suddenly crossed the hangar floor below them toward Victor Hale. The older engineer stiffened instantly as one officer held up a tablet displaying the authorization logs. Several stunned technicians stepped aside while Victor's face drained of color beneath the harsh morning lights. Ethan watched silently for a moment. Then he looked back toward Naomi. You knew somebody sabotaged the system before anyone else. Naomi shrugged softly. Machines tell the truth faster than people do. Ethan let out the smallest breath of laughter at that. Below them, sunlight now flooded fully through the eastern glass wall, washing the giant turbine in warm gold light, while the engine continued running perfectly beneath the restored synchronization cycle. Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a silver access badge. Naomi looked confused as he held it out toward her. Effective immediately, he said. You no longer work for the hotel. Naomi blinked once. Ethan's voice remained calm but certain. Welcome to Whitmore Dynamics, lead systems engineer Naomi Carter. For a moment she could not speak. The giant turbine hummed steadily behind them while morning sunlight caught the oil stains still darkening the red cloth around her wrist. Naomi looked down at the badge resting in her hand, then back toward the engine her father would have understood better than anyone else in the world. Quietly, almost to herself, she whispered, "We did it, Dad."